something quiet is about to begin. You found your way here, and that means something. Welcome to Sleepy Science. I am so glad you are here tonight. This channel exists for moments exactly like this one, when the day has finally wound down, and all you need is something calm, something slow, something that feels worth listening to as your eyes grow heavy. If you are new here, welcome. Consider liking this video and subscribing to Sleepy Science so you never miss a night like this one. And if something tonight moves you, maybe a story lands softly in your chest, or a creature surprises you, leave a comment. We read every single one. This little corner of the internet runs on that kind of kindness. And if you would like to help keep these videos coming, there is a Patreon linked below. Every contribution there keeps the channel alive and the quiet growing. Now, let everything else go. Tonight, we are going somewhere different. Not upward into space, not deep into the ocean floor, but into the forests, the rivers, the grasslands, the mountain passes and hidden valleys of our own planet. We are going to follow something rare, something that slips through the world like a rumor. Something that, if you are lucky enough to encounter it, stops you completely, the way only a few things in a lifetime can. We are going to spend this evening with the ghost animals of the wild. The pale ones, the white ones, the ones that were born carrying a silence their whole species never intended. We are going to talk about albino wildlife. Not as a curiosity, not as something strange to gawk at, but as something beautiful. Something that reveals, if you look closely enough, a great deal about what life actually is. Fragile and extraordinary, rare and stubborn, fleeting and somehow unforgettable. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath slow down. And come with me. Before we meet the animals themselves, it helps to understand what albinism actually is. Not in a clinical, textbook way, but in the way that makes it feel real. Every living creature that has pigment in its body, in its skin, its fur, its feathers, its scales, produces that color through a process. It is not simply painted on. It is manufactured, molecule by molecule, inside specialized cells. The most important of these pigments is called melanin. It is the same substance that colors human skin and hair. It gives tigers their orange, ravens their blue-black shine, leopards their rosettes, and brown bears their rich earthen coats. Melanin does more than just color things. It absorbs ultraviolet light. It protects tissue from sun damage. It plays a role in how the eyes process vision. It is, in a very real sense, a shield. Albinism happens when a genetic mutation disrupts the production of this pigment. The instructions for making melanin become garbled. The machinery for producing it either slows to almost nothing or stops entirely. And the result is an animal that enters the world without its color. White skin, white fur, white feathers, white scales. and in most cases, pink or red eyes. Because without pigment in the iris, the blood vessels behind the eye become visible, glowing faintly through the pale tissue. True albinism is rare in most species. It requires both parents to carry the recessive gene. Neither parent needs to be albino themselves. They simply need to carry the possibility, a quiet inheritance, passed silently down through generations, until two carriers find each other, and a pale, blinking creature is born into a world that was not designed for it. There is also leucism, a related but distinct condition, where pigment cells are absent or reduced across the body, but the eyes remain their normal color. Leucistic animals are often described as white or pale, and they are sometimes mistaken for albino animals. The difference is subtle but meaningful. A white wolf with golden eyes is leucistic. A white wolf with pink eyes is truly albino. Tonight we will meet both kinds. Though we will often simply call them the pale ones, the white ones, because in the softness of this evening, the precise biology matters less than the feeling of encountering something so rare it barely seems real. Each one of these animals is, in its own quiet way, a small miracle of chance. Imagine driving a back road at dusk. The sky is the color of peach and old lavender. The trees on either side are dark silhouettes, their branches beginning to disappear into shadow. You slow down because you always slow down on roads like this one, roads that feel like they exist slightly apart from the rest of the world. And then you see it. At the tree line, almost glowing against the dark wall of forest behind it, stands a deer. Pure white. Every inch of it, its legs, its belly, its neck, its face. The last sliver of evening light catches it just so, and for a moment it does not look like an animal at all. It looks like something the forest dreamed. White-tailed deer with albinism are documented across parts of North America, and they carry a kind of mythology that has followed them through generations of human encounter. Indigenous communities in many parts of the continent have long held white deer as sacred. To encounter one was considered a profound sign, a message from beyond the ordinary, a meeting with something that did not belong entirely to the physical world. And when you consider how rare they are, that reverence makes a kind of sense. Estimates suggest that the chance of a white-tailed deer being born with true albinism is somewhere around 1 in 30,000. Those are not just long odds. Those are the kind of odds that make every confirmed sighting feel like something borrowed from a story. The albino deer faces real challenges in the wild. Without its natural coloring, it cannot blend into the dappled light of a forest floor the way its cousins do. A normal white-tailed deer, with its brown summer coat, can disappear into a stand of trees in seconds. The albino one stands out everywhere it goes. Bright against snow, bright against mud, bright in the long shadows of autumn. Predators can spot it at a distance. In the early months of life, survival is genuinely uncertain. And yet some of them survive. Some of them grow into full adults. Some of them move through the forest for years, spotted occasionally by a hiker, a farmer, a hunter who lowers their rifle without quite understanding why. There is a place in New York State called Seneca Army Depot, a former military installation now partly converted to a nature preserve, where a population of white deer has lived and grown for decades. These deer are not all truly albino in the strictest sense, but they are white, breathtakingly so, and they have been protected within that fenced land for long enough that the population has grown to include hundreds of individuals. People who have visited describe walking across the grounds at dawn and seeing dozens of white forms moving through the mist. Quietly, without sound, the grass still wet, the light barely beginning, and all those pale bodies drifting between trees. More than a few visitors have said they cried without knowing why. There is something about the white deer that does that to people. It asks nothing of you. It does not perform its rarity. It simply exists, quietly, persistently, impossibly, in a world that was not built with it in mind. Let the forest fade now. Let the trees dissolve into open water. Picture the ocean off the eastern coast of Australia. Summer. The water is an impossible blue, the kind that does not look real from above. Beneath the surface, the sea is layered, pale near the surface, deepening to shadow, then to a darkness that could hold anything at all. In 1992, a whale watcher standing on a vessel off Queensland noticed something unusual in the distance. A humpback whale was breaching. That spectacular full-body leap that humpbacks are famous for. But the color was wrong. Humpbacks are dark. Their backs are grey-black, their bellies white, a two-toned architecture built for camouflage in the shifting light of open ocean. But this whale was entirely white. White from flukes to rostrum. White and enormous and alive. The whale was named Migaloo, a word drawn from an Australian Aboriginal language meaning roughly white fella. He became, over the decades that followed, one of the most famous animals on the planet. Migaloo migrates along the Australian east coast twice a year, northward in winter toward warmer breeding grounds, southward in summer toward Antarctic feeding waters. Each migration, he is spotted by whale watchers, researchers, and ordinary people who simply happen to be in the right place at the right time. The sightings are always reported the same way, with a kind of breathless disbelief, as though seeing him once does not make the second sighting any less extraordinary. What is it about a white whale that undoes people the way it does? There is, of course, the literary shadow of Melville's great white whale, a shadow that falls across every pale cetacean whether we intend it or not. But Migaloo is nothing like that creature. He is not menacing. He is not a symbol of obsession or doom. He is simply a large and healthy animal going about the ancient work of his species. Feeding, migrating, breathing, occasionally breaching in a way that sends water cascading in sheets from his white flanks. The people on the boats who see him describe something like gratitude not the gratitude of receiving a gift. Exactly. More the gratitude of being reminded that the world is larger and stranger and more generous than your ordinary day suggests. That something so improbable is out there, real and massive and indifferent to its own improbability, going about its life in the open ocean. Scientists who have studied Migaloo believe he is likely a true albino, though the pink eye confirmation is difficult from a distance. His skin is not the stark white of paper. It is the cream of old bone and sea foam, and in certain lights it takes on a faint golden tone, where the sun has been at it for years. He is thought to be in his 30s now, which makes him a mature adult, relatively young for a species that can live past 80. One of the concerns for albino whales is sun exposure. Without melanin in the skin, there is far less protection against ultraviolet radiation. Migaloo has been photographed with areas of rough, blistered skin on his dorsal fin and back. Sunburn, essentially. The ocean surface, for all its beauty, is a place of intense solar exposure for an animal that spends time there breathing. And yet, he is still out there, still surfacing in the winter swells, still exhaling those vast columns of mist, still turning the heads of everyone who happens to be watching the water on the right morning. There are now reports of at least 2 other white humpbacks in Australian waters. A younger individual, sometimes called Migaloo Jr., possibly a son, and another pale whale sighted further south. Whether they are related or coincidental, science cannot yet say for certain. But the idea that the ocean might carry more than one of these luminous creatures, moving beneath the surface, rising to breathe in their impossible whiteness, is the kind of thought that keeps wonder alive. The ocean is enormous. Most of what lives in it, we will never see. But somewhere in that deep blue, a white whale is swimming south towards summer feeding grounds, utterly indifferent to the fact that the entire world finds it extraordinary. Come with me now to the bushveld, to the dry, warm, amber-scented landscapes of southern Africa, where the sun is enormous and the grass turns the color of wheat in the dry season. The Timbavati Private Nature Reserve sits on the western border of Kruger National Park in South Africa. It is a place where the big cats still move in the old ways. Unhurried, ancient, deeply at home in the land. And it is the place where, in the 1970s, something happened that changed the way people thought about lions forever. White lion cubs were born. Not one, several. Over a period of years, multiple litters were recorded containing cubs of an astonishing cream-white coloring. So pale against the red African earth, so luminous under the wide sky, that local communities who had known this land for generations spoke of them as spirits. White lions are not technically albino in the classic sense. They carry a gene called chinchilla mutation, sometimes referred to as the color inhibitor gene, that dilutes the normal tawny pigmentation rather than eliminating it entirely. Their eyes are often golden or blue-green. Their noses and paw pads retain a pinkish tone. They are leucistic, rather than truly albino, though the effect on the observer is much the same. When a white lion stands in the red dust of the Timbavati at sunrise, There are no adequate words. The Chwane people and the Sepedi-speaking communities of this region have oral traditions that go back many generations, describing white lions as messengers, animals that carry significance beyond the physical. To see one was to know that something important was happening, or was about to happen. They were not merely animals. They were presences. For a while, this reverence did not protect them. In the 1980s and 90s, several white lions were removed from the wild, captured and sent to zoos and game farms where they became spectacles. The wild population dwindled. For years, there were no confirmed white lions in the Timbavati. Conservation organizations eventually stepped in. White lions were bred and reintroduced into the wild. It was slow, careful work, teaching animals that had grown up in captivity to hunt, to bond with a pride, to navigate a landscape that asks a great deal of any apex predator, and asks even more of one that cannot hide in the grass. Because white lions cannot. Their camouflage is almost nothing. A tawny lion can crouch in the long, dry grass and become invisible. A white lion crouching in that same grass is a white shape in a golden field, obvious to prey, visible from great distance. And yet they hunt. And yet they survive. Research suggests they compensate through behavior, hunting more often at night, relying more on coordinated ambush, working with other members of the pride in ways that minimize their visibility disadvantage. Intelligence. Adaptation. The deep animal insistence on continuing. There is now a small but established population of white lions in and around the Timbavati. Researchers monitor them. Local communities protect them. And sometimes, on a clear morning when the light is low and gold, a safari vehicle stops in the dust, and everyone in it falls completely silent, because there, walking slow and certain through the thorn trees, is a white lion. Just being. Just moving. Just alive. The light changes again now. We leave the savanna and move into something thicker, warmer. The air has weight here. There is green everywhere. Deep, lush, tropical green. And the water is still and dark beneath it all. We are in the bayous of Louisiana. The cypress trees rise straight and strange, their roots flaring out at the waterline, their branches draped with long grey moss that moves only when the breeze decides to. It is a landscape that operates on its own time, unhurried, ancient, held together by heat and humidity and the patience of creatures who have been here, unchanged, for tens of millions of years. And in the warm water, in the quiet, dark shallows where the light comes through in patches, there is an albino alligator. Albino alligators are among the rarest animals on the planet. Estimates put the number of known living albino alligators at fewer than 20 individuals worldwide. That number includes those in captivity. In the wild, the count is believed to be lower still. Perhaps only a handful, if any, survive to adulthood at all. The reason is the sun. American alligators are ectotherms. They rely on external heat sources to regulate their body temperature. They bask. Long hours on sun-warmed banks, soaking heat into their bodies, managing their metabolism through light and warmth. For a normally pigmented alligator, this is simply life. For an albino alligator, every hour of sun exposure is also damage. Without melanin in the skin, the ultraviolet light burns through. It damages cells. It creates sores. It stacks up over time into something serious. And then there is visibility. A young alligator in the dark water of a Louisiana bayou is nearly invisible. Dark-scaled, still, indistinguishable from a floating log. An albino hatchling in that same water is a pale and glowing thing. Every bird that hunts from above, every larger predator sharing the water, every threat in a landscape full of them, all of them can see it. Most albino alligator hatchlings do not survive their first year. The ones in captivity, however, can thrive. Several are housed in controlled environments, in aquariums and wildlife centers, where they receive UV-filtered lighting, regular feeding, and protection from the pressures of the wild. Albino alligators in these settings can grow to their full adult size, can reach lengths of 10 and 11 feet, can live for decades. One of the most famous is a large female named Spots. Though she has no spots, the name stuck. She has lived at a wildlife park in Florida for decades, and children who visited her as small kids have brought their own children to see her now. She is pale pink and cream white, enormous and quiet, floating in her pool with the ancient composure of something that has always existed, and expects to keep on doing so. There is something about a pale alligator that unsettles in the most interesting way. We expect certain things to be dark. We expect certain animals to carry the camouflage of their environment, the shadows, the earth tones, the practical colors of survival. And when one arrives without those colors, wearing its whiteness like a statement, the familiar becomes suddenly unfamiliar again. The creature we think we know reveals itself to be deeper and stranger than we imagined. In the warm water, in the quiet, still as patience itself, the pale alligator waits. Let the bayou cool and fade. Let the air shift to something crisper. Southern hemisphere air, clean with the smell of fern and damp earth, and the sea not far off. We are in New Zealand now. The kind of green that feels personal here. The islands are densely forested in places. The trees different from anywhere else in the world, shaped by millions of years of evolving without mammals. Birds filled every niche here that mammals occupy elsewhere. And one of the most remarkable of those birds is the kiwi. Small, round, flightless, nocturnal, built entirely to its own specifications. Kiwis are extraordinary for many reasons. They are the only bird known to have nostrils at the tip of their bill. Their feathers are more like hair than typical feathers. Soft and loose and shaggy. They lay eggs proportionally enormous for their body size, A kiwi egg can be up to a fifth of the mother's total body weight. They mate for life in many cases. They navigate largely by smell. They are, in almost every way, a bird that decided the usual bird rules did not apply. In 2011, a white kiwi chick hatched at Rainbow Springs Nature Park in Rotorua, New Zealand. She was named Manukura, a name in the Maori language meaning of chiefly status. Her whiteness was not full albinism. Her eyes were their normal dark color, suggesting leucism rather than true albino genetics. But she was white. Softly, completely white. Her shaggy, hair-like feathers the color of fresh snow or old cream, depending on the light. For many Maori communities, Manukura's birth was significant beyond biology. White animals hold a place of importance in Maori tradition, connected to atua, to spiritual significance, to a sense that certain things arrive carrying meaning beyond what is visible. Tribal elders came to see her. Ceremonies were held. She was treated not merely as an unusual animal, but as a small presence of great importance. Manukura lived at the park for years, growing, foraging, living in the unhurried nighttime way of kiwis, snuffling through leaf litter with her long bill, completely indifferent to the attention she received from the human world. There is something about a white kiwi that is difficult to describe without slipping into poetry. The kiwi is already a bird that seems to exist slightly outside normal categories. Too small to be frightening, too odd to be ordinary, too ancient to be hurried. Make it white, and it becomes something else entirely. Not a bird from the present world, but a bird from a place between waking and dreaming. A white kiwi moving through the ferns at midnight, its pale form catching whatever light the moon provides, its bill working the earth, its breath steady and small. There is nothing quite like it. And the fact that it exists, that the genetics of chance produced it, that it hatched and grew and lived, is a kind of quiet astonishment. Some animals become so rare they carry the weight of something larger than themselves. Snowflake was a western lowland gorilla, the only confirmed albino gorilla known to science. He was found in 1966 in the equatorial forests of what was then called Spanish Guinea, now Equatorial Guinea in West Africa. He was a young infant when he was captured, pale and pink-eyed, impossible to miss. He was brought to the Barcelona Zoo in Spain, where he would spend his entire life, nearly 4 decades, becoming one of the most visited and most recognized animals in the history of any zoo anywhere. Snowflake was a true albino. His fur was white, not the near white of age, not a pale variation of normal gorilla gray, but genuinely white. His eyes were pale blue, his skin pink, his expression carrying the same profound intelligence and depth that all gorillas possess. He was not lessened by his albinism. He was, in many ways, the most vivid individual anyone who visited him had ever encountered. Scientists who studied him found that his albinism was caused by a specific mutation, one that arose in the isolated forest population he came from, where the small size of the group increased the likelihood of two individuals carrying the same recessive gene meeting and producing offspring. In a larger, more genetically diverse population, the odds were against him ever existing. He was, in the truest sense, an accident of geography and genetics. He was a father many times over. None of his offspring were albino. His mates did not carry the same gene. But there were several grandchildren who were, suggesting the gene had passed on quietly, waiting. In his later years, Snowflake developed a skin condition that eventually became a non-hereditary melanoma. A deep irony that the animal most defined by the absence of melanin would be claimed in part by its corruption. He died in 2003 at approximately 40 years of age. A long life for a wild-caught gorilla in those early decades of zookeeping. The city of Barcelona mourned him as a citizen. That sounds excessive, perhaps, until you consider what it means to have lived alongside something for nearly 40 years. Generations of Barcelonans grew up with Snowflake. Grandparents who visited as children brought their own grandchildren before the end. He was woven into the city's fabric, not a curiosity or a trophy, but a presence. Something that asked nothing of the people who came to see him, except that they pay attention. And they did. Millions of them. They paid attention for almost 4 decades. There has not been another confirmed albino gorilla since. In all the forests, in all the zoos, in all the years that have passed, not one. Snowflake remains, for now, the only one there has ever been. Ravens are not supposed to be white. If any bird in the natural world seems to have chosen darkness deliberately, chosen the blue-black of wet ink, the oily shimmer of shadow, the deep color of something that knows things, it is the raven. Ravens are the philosophers of the bird world. They solve problems, they play, they remember faces, they hold grudges, they leave gifts for humans who have been kind to them. They are the birds that appear in mythology from one end of the world to the other. Odin's ravens, the ravens of the Tower of London, Raven, the trickster creator of Pacific Northwest oral tradition. All of those mythological ravens are black. And then you have the white ones. Albino and leucistic ravens appear occasionally. Rarely, but reliably enough that they crop up in records across centuries. The Pacific Northwest of North America, with its thick coastal forests and its ancient human relationship with the raven, has seen its share of white ravens documented over the years. In 2017, a white raven was photographed on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. The photographs circulated widely, not because white ravens had never been seen before, but because this particular bird was fully leucistic, bright white against the grey-green background of the West Coast forest, and it was simply striking. The raven stood on a branch, exactly as ravens stand, with that particular raven composure. Upright, alert, slightly tilted as though considering a question. And it was white. Its beak glossy black in contrast to the pale feathers. Its eye dark and bright. Its posture exactly the same as any of its black counterparts. Indigenous communities along the coast of British Columbia and Alaska carry the white raven in their stories. In some traditions, raven begins as a white bird. It is through the act of stealing fire or bringing light into the world that raven becomes blackened. The white raven is not the transformed version, but the original. Raven before the great deeds, before the soot of creation. To see a white raven is sometimes interpreted as encountering the beginning of the story before anything was changed. Ravens remember. This is not a sentimental claim. It is documented. Ravens remember the faces of humans who have been kind to them and those who have not. They remember locations where food was hidden, sometimes for months. They remember the calls of individual birds in their social group. A raven that has lived in a territory for several years carries a detailed map of that place. The best foraging spots, the reliable water sources, the positions of the other ravens whose business it needs to track. The white raven carries all of this. The same deep memory, the same intelligence, the same complex inner life that has made ravens the most cognitively studied of all wild birds. It simply wears a different coat while doing so. A white raven in a black tree forest. Its white feathers lit by whatever pale coastal light filters through the canopy. Its dark eye tracking everything. Its mind doing what raven minds always do. Processing, calculating, understanding more than seems reasonable for something with wings. You would watch it until it flew. And when it flew, you would watch the sky it had been in for a long time after. There is a particular kind of silence in the boreal forest at the end of autumn. The leaves are gone. The sky is low and white. The birch trees stand in silver lines, their trunks pale against the grey air. The ground is not yet fully frozen, but each morning there is a little more frost and a little less give in the earth. Into this landscape, this already quiet, already pale landscape, imagine a white moose. Albino and leucistic moose have been photographed and filmed in Scandinavia and across northern Canada for decades. They are not common. They are perhaps slightly less vanishingly rare than some other white animals on this list. There seem to be small pockets of the recessive gene spread through certain moose populations, but they are still extraordinary. A fully white moose is a massive animal, and it wears its whiteness with the unconscious authority of something that was simply born this way, and has never been told it should look different. In Sweden, white moose have become something approaching community icons in certain rural areas. One particular white bull moose was spotted repeatedly over several years in the Värmland region. A large, pale-coated animal with the wide antlers of a healthy, mature bull, moving through the birch and pine forests as though he owned them. Local residents protected him. A campaign was established to ensure he would not be hunted. Unusual in Sweden, where moose hunting is a serious cultural tradition. But this moose was different, and people knew it. Video footage of the white Swedish bull moose wading through a forest stream became quietly viral. Not in the loud and algorithmic way, but in the way that genuinely beautiful things spread. slowly, passed between people who wanted someone else to see it too. The moose moving through the water, white and enormous and unhurried, the forest grey around him, the water catching light. In Sami culture, the indigenous people of northern Scandinavia and Russia, white animals have carried deep significance for centuries. White reindeer, white wolves, white bears. Each appearance in the landscape was considered a communication from something beyond the visible. Not a bad omen. Not a good one. Simply a message, waiting to be understood by those who knew how to pay attention. The white moose wading through that Swedish stream was not performing anything. It was not aware of the camera. It was not aware of the concept of rarity, of the human impulse to protect beautiful things, of the videos and the articles, and the wonder that would spread outward from this one moment in a grey autumn forest. It was just wading, just moving through cold water, on its way from one part of the forest to another. Just alive. Which is, perhaps, the most astonishing thing about all of them. Of all the creatures we could expect to be defined by color, the hummingbird stands near the top of the list. Hummingbirds are color made into motion. The iridescent throat of a ruby-throated hummingbird, that impossible shift between green and red and almost black as the light changes, is one of the small visual miracles of the natural world. The gorget, as that throat patch is called, is not even a pigment in the traditional sense. It is structural color, the microscopic arrangement of feather barbules that bends and reflects light in specific wavelengths. It is color that only exists in relationship with the viewer. It is color as conversation. Now imagine a hummingbird without any of that. Albino hummingbirds are documented, though they are so rare that most ornithologists will go their entire careers without ever encountering one. A white hummingbird is not simply a hummingbird without color. It is a tiny piece of high-speed aerial machinery, delicate as a watch movement, now rendered in white and pale pink. Its wings still beat at somewhere between 50 and 80 times per second. Its heart still races at over 1,200 beats per minute during flight. It still hovers with that extraordinary precision, that perfect stillness in motion. But now it is white. In 2019, a bird photographer in West Virginia captured what appeared to be an albino ruby-throated hummingbird visiting a backyard feeder. The photographs showed a hummingbird that was entirely white. No ruby throat, no green back, no dark wing bars. Just a tiny white shape, hovering at the feeder with the particular intensity all hummingbirds bring to the act of feeding. The images were remarkable precisely because of that contrast. The vigorous, vibrant life of the animal against the absence of all its expected vibrancy. Energy without its usual decoration. Motion without color. The hummingbird itself, stripped of its spectacle, and still somehow spectacular. Albino hummingbirds face particular challenges. Many species use their coloring as signals. The gorget of a male hummingbird communicates health and genetic quality to potential mates. Without that signal, finding a partner is more difficult. And without the camouflage that their natural coloring provides against predators, survival is more uncertain. But here was one, feeding in a West Virginia backyard. Quick, as all hummingbirds are. White as milk glass. Going about the ancient work of fueling its extraordinary little body. The person who photographed it described standing very still at the window for a long time after the bird flew away, not wanting to break the mood of what had just happened. I understand that feeling completely. The mountains of Alberta and British Columbia hold a particular kind of grandeur. They are large in the way that diminishes and soothes simultaneously. Too large to be anxious about, too real to be abstract. The peaks carry snow year-round. The valleys have rivers that run grey-green with glacial melt. The forests are dense and dark and alive with things that have not changed their habits in thousands of years. In these mountains, grizzly bears move through their territories with a confidence that belongs to an animal that evolved without natural predators. They are enormous and capable and entirely at home. Their fur is typically the brown and blonde and dark-tipped color that gives the species its grizzled appearance. The particular shading of the guard hairs that shifts in sunlight from dark chocolate to pale gold. But there are legends in these mountains of a white grizzly. Documented sightings are rare, but they exist. Over the decades, hunters, guides, and wildlife biologists working in the backcountry of the Canadian Rockies have occasionally reported seeing a bear of unusually pale coloring, cream or white or silver, far lighter than any normal variation. In 2014, photographs circulated of what appeared to be a leucistic or albino grizzly in the Rocky Mountain backcountry. A large, pale-furred animal photographed at a distance, moving through a meadow as grizzlies do, with that distinctive rolling shoulder gait, that unmistakable heaviness and ease combined. Only white. The photographs are not high resolution. The story is not definitively confirmed by science in the way of a captured and examined animal. But they exist. They are out there. And the people who have seen things like this in the mountains are not people who generally exaggerate. For the Stoney Nakoda Nation and other First Nations peoples of the Alberta foothills and mountains, a white grizzly belongs to a category of animal encounters that requires a particular kind of respect and attention. These are not simply unusual animals. They are moments when the boundary between the ordinary world and something older becomes visible. A white grizzly in a mountain meadow in September, when the fireweed has gone to seed and the air smells of pine and frost. Turning to look at you from 100 meters, its pale form enormous and still against the grey-green slope. The bear would not care about your wonder. It would simply look and then go on with whatever it was doing. That indifference is part of what makes it so affecting. The rarity is entirely yours. The meaning is entirely yours. The bear just is. Giant pandas are already extraordinary in their coloring. That black and white pattern, the black eye patches, the black ears, the black limbs against a white body, is unlike any other large mammal in the world. Scientists debate exactly why pandas evolved this particular appearance. Some believe the dark eye patches help reduce glare in snowy environments. Others suggest the contrasting pattern functions as a social signal. Still others theorize it is simply the result of genetic drift in a population that became isolated long ago. Whatever the reason, the panda wears its colors with tremendous authority. In 2019, camera traps in the Wolong National Nature Reserve in Sichuan Province, China, captured something that had never been documented before: an entirely white giant panda. Not white with black patches, not a panda with unusually pale markings. Entirely, completely, uniformly white. The images were taken at night, with the infrared flash that camera traps use in darkness. The panda moved through the bamboo forest in that unhurried, rolling panda walk, a gait that manages to appear both deliberate and slightly clumsy simultaneously, and its entire body glowed pale against the darker forest floor. Researchers at the China Conservation and Research Center for the Giant Panda confirmed the sighting. The panda appeared to be young, perhaps 1 to 2 years old, and in good health. Its behavior looked normal. It was foraging, moving, doing what young pandas do. The genetic mutation responsible appeared to be a single recessive gene affecting melanin production, classic albinism or a close variant. The researchers noted that both parents would need to carry the gene, which is itself remarkable, given how small the wild panda population already is. The gene would need to have been carried silently through generations, until, finally, 2 individuals carrying it met and produced this one singular white cub. There are fewer than 2,000 giant pandas in the wild. That number is growing, thanks to decades of conservation effort, but it is still small enough that every individual matters enormously. The white panda cub represents not just a genetic curiosity, but a thread in the continuing story of an animal that the world nearly lost and has been working to bring back. Somewhere in the Sichuan mountains, in bamboo forest so dense it barely lets the light through, that white panda is grown now. An adult, moving through the green dark in its impossible whiteness, eating bamboo with the focused dedication of a panda at work, entirely unaware of the quiet amazement it left behind in the world. Sometimes the rarity is not in the spectacle. Sometimes it is in the ordinary. The common blackbird, Turdus merula, the bird that sings from English garden walls and European city parks, the bird whose evening song is one of the most beautiful in the temperate world, is, as its name suggests, black. The male is all black, with an orange-yellow bill and a ring around the eye of the same warm color. He is handsome in a tidy, familiar way. He is the bird at the end of the day, perched on the highest point he can find, singing into the last of the light. Occasionally, a blackbird is born white or partially white. Leucism appears in blackbirds with enough frequency that birdwatchers across Britain and Europe have recorded dozens of sightings over the years. White blackbirds, piebald blackbirds with white patches, pale birds that still carry that distinctive yellow bill. There is something about a white blackbird that has captured British imagination specifically for centuries. The phrase rare as a white blackbird appears in English as early as the 1700s. Used to describe something that should not exist, something whose very name contradicts its nature. A white blackbird is a walking paradox, a contradiction in terms made flesh. And yet they appear. In garden after garden, in park after park, year after year. A white bird with the shape and the movements of a blackbird, hopping across wet grass in the morning in that characteristic way, pausing to listen for worms in the earth, tilting its head at that distinctive alert angle. And sometimes, in the evening, it sings. That is perhaps the most quietly extraordinary detail of all. The white blackbird sings the blackbird's song, not a different song for a different kind of creature. The same long, liquid, improvisational evening melody that blackbirds have been singing since long before there were gardens or walls to sing from. The song is the same. Only the singer looks impossible. Let the cool air of the garden soften now into the warm, salt-heavy air of a tropical beach. The beach is dark at this hour. 2 in the morning, the moon reflecting off the waves in long white stripes, the sand still warm from the day's sun. Down near the water's edge, where the surf hisses and pulls back with each wave, the sand is marked with wide tracks. A sea turtle has come ashore. Sea turtles have been laying their eggs on beaches like this one for more than 100 million years. Before the dinosaurs disappeared, before the continents reached their current positions, long before any mammal walked upright on any land, sea turtles were already doing exactly this, coming ashore in the dark, digging nests in the warm sand, laying their eggs, returning to the water. Most sea turtle hatchlings are dark, charcoal grey or greenish black, their colour camouflage for an ocean full of predators. But in a small number of documented cases, albino or leucistic hatchlings have emerged from their nests along with their dark siblings, pale and unmistakable in the dark sand. The odds against a pale sea turtle hatchling surviving are severe. The journey from nest to water, crossing open beach in the dark, guided by the horizon's faint glow, is already dangerous. Birds take them. Crabs take them. Heat takes them. Of every 100 hatchlings that enter the ocean, perhaps one will survive to adulthood. A white hatchling faces those same odds with the additional disadvantage of being visible in every environment it enters. Pale against the dark sand, pale against the blue-green water, pale in the shallows where everything is visible. There have been documented cases of albino loggerhead, green, and leatherback turtle hatchlings. Most of these do not survive the first days. A few have been photographed at sea, pale, almost translucent shapes in the water, paddling with the same ancient urgency as their darker kin. Whether any albino sea turtle has ever grown to full adulthood in the wild is, as far as anyone knows, unconfirmed. The ocean is enormous, and adult sea turtles are not easy to study in any color. It is possible, just possible, that somewhere in the deep Pacific or the warm Atlantic, A pale sea turtle the size of a coffee table is swimming through water columns lit by bioluminescent plankton, utterly ancient, utterly unhurried, wearing its whiteness like a quiet secret. That possibility alone, that one small thought, is enough. Not all of these stories are about solitary individuals. Some of them are about places where the rare became, over generations, unexpectedly common. In several small towns across the eastern United States, there are populations of white squirrels. Not one or two. Not a single albino individual threading through a normal squirrel population. But true populations, dozens, sometimes hundreds of white squirrels, living alongside their gray-coated relatives in the parks and neighborhoods of certain towns, so numerous that they have become the identity of those places. Brevard, North Carolina, calls itself the white squirrel capital of the world. The town holds an annual white squirrel festival. White squirrel statues stand in the downtown area. Visitors come specifically to walk through the park and watch the white squirrels going about their squirrel business, chasing each other up oaks, burying acorns with that focused squirrel intensity, sitting on fences looking precisely as alert and slightly judgmental as squirrels everywhere look. The white squirrels of Brevard are mostly leucistic rather than truly albino. They have dark eyes, white fur, and in some cases, faint darker markings. The population is believed to have originated from a few individuals released in the area decades ago from somewhere further south, and those individuals carried the leucism gene in high enough frequency that it spread through the local squirrel population over generations. Olney, Illinois, is another white squirrel town. The squirrels there have legal right-of-way on streets, an actual ordinance protecting them. A fine exists for running one over. Police officers wear a small white squirrel patch on their uniforms. The squirrels themselves are, being squirrels, entirely unaware of all this formal recognition. What these towns reveal is something interesting about the genetics of small, isolated populations. When a group of animals is geographically concentrated, when the same families interact generation after generation in the same parks and neighborhoods, recessive traits can accumulate. What would normally be washed out in a large, diverse population stays in circulation. Two squirrels carrying the same quiet gene are likely to be neighbors. Their offspring carry it in higher concentration. Over decades, white squirrels become the norm rather than the exception. This is evolution happening in real time, visible from a park bench with a bag of acorns. There is something deeply appealing about the white squirrel towns. We spend so much of our time thinking about rarity as something fragile, something that must be protected, preserved, shielded from the ordinary forces that would extinguish it. And often, that is true. Many of the animals in this story are genuinely endangered by their own visibility, their own difference, the way the world was not designed to accommodate them. But in Brevard and Olney and the handful of other towns across the eastern United States where white squirrels have established themselves, the rarity became common. The mutation that would ordinarily disappear in a generation or two found a pocket in the world where it could persist and spread and eventually become the identity of a place. People built festivals around it. Children grew up with it. The white squirrel became, in those towns, not the exception but the expectation. There is hope in that. The stubborn, quiet hope of a recessive gene that found exactly the right conditions and simply refused to disappear. And the squirrels themselves are, as far as squirrel behavior goes, entirely comfortable with their own appearance. They do not behave like animals that know they are unusual. They chase and chatter and steal and bury exactly as squirrels do. Their whiteness is simply who they are. Which is, again, perhaps the most important thing any of us can learn from them. Let the oak trees and the park benches dissolve now. Step into something older. Cobras have appeared in human mythology since the oldest recorded civilizations. In ancient Egypt, the uraeus, the rearing cobra symbol, adorned the crowns of pharaohs. In Hinduism, Shiva wears a cobra around his neck. In Buddhist tradition, the Naga king Mukalinda sheltered the Buddha from rain, spreading his great hood. Cobras are animals that have lived alongside humanity in story and symbol for as long as we have told stories. They are also, let us be precise here, profoundly serious animals. The king cobra, the largest venomous snake in the world, can reach lengths of nearly 18 feet. Its venom is not the most potent of all cobras, but the sheer quantity it can deliver in a single bite makes an encounter with one something to treat with absolute respect. Now, make it white. Albino king cobras exist. They are extraordinarily rare in the wild. So rare that documented wild encounters are almost non-existent. In captivity, they are maintained by a small number of herpetologists and licensed reptile facilities. Their appearance is startling even for those familiar with snakes. The typical olive and black and bronze of a king cobra replaced by cream and pale gold and pink, the hood still capable of spreading to its full impressive width, the eyes a pale pink red. An albino king cobra does not look weaker. It does not look diminished. It looks, if anything, more striking than its normally colored counterparts, because the absence of the expected dark coloring reveals the architecture of the animal more clearly. The scales, the pattern of them, the way the hood ribs fan outward when the animal is alert, the precision of the jaw and the flicker of the forked tongue. In the wild, an albino cobra would face severe challenges. Cobras in their natural coloring can disappear into leaf litter, into shadow, into the patterns of a forest floor. A white cobra on that same forest floor is visible at great distance. Large predators, birds of prey, large monitor lizards, other snakes, would find it far more easily. A young albino cobra, still small enough to be prey, would face extremely poor survival odds. That any survive at all, even briefly, in the wild is remarkable. That some reach adulthood in captivity and live long, healthy lives there, is simply the animal being what the animal is. Resilient, adaptable, entirely its own creature. An albino king cobra in full hood, pale as a ghost, regarding the world with those pink eyes from a height of 3 feet or more. There is nothing else quite like it on this earth. There is a herpetologist who has spent over 30 years studying king cobras in the wild, tracking them through tropical forests, following their movements, documenting their extraordinary intelligence and unusually complex social behaviors for what most people assume is a solitary animal. He has described king cobras as among the most cognitively sophisticated reptiles he has ever encountered, capable of recognizing individual humans, adjusting their behavior based on past interactions, demonstrating what appears to be genuine curiosity about novel objects in their environment. When asked about the possibility of an albino king cobra surviving in the wild, he said something worth sitting with. He said that in the forest, the king cobra's greatest protection is not its venom, but its intelligence. A king cobra that knows its territory, that has learned the patterns of its environment and the movements of its prey, is a king cobra that is very difficult to kill. A pale king cobra in the same territory, with the same intelligence and the same knowledge, might face greater risk in some directions. But it would also bring to that risk everything its species has developed over millions of years. The intelligence, the awareness, the patience. He said, "Do not assume the white snake is helpless." The pale king cobra moves through the forest understory with the careful intelligence of an apex predator who has simply arrived in an unexpected color. Not diminished, not weakened in its essential nature, simply wearing a different coat, and still, in every other way, entirely itself. Beauty and gravity, inseparable. There is a phrase that appears in English and in many European languages, to prove the white crow. It comes from the ancient Roman poet Juvenal, who wrote that a good person was as rare as a white crow, using the bird's supposed impossibility as a shorthand for something that should not exist. The phrase survived the centuries because the paradox stayed alive. How do you prove something that everyone agrees cannot happen? And then a white crow turns up. White crows appear in the records. They are rare, more rare than white ravens, seemingly, but they exist. Leucistic and albino individuals have been documented in several countries, including the United Kingdom, Germany, and North America. A white carrion crow photographed in Scotland. A pale hooded crow documented in Scandinavia. Each one a small correction to the ancient assumption. The philosopher William James used the white crow as a metaphor in a different way. He wrote that all he needed was one white crow to disprove the claim that all crows were black. One confirmed exception, one properly documented outlier, and the general rule is not a rule at all, only a tendency. In the world of rare and pale animals, this feels true in a way that goes beyond philosophy. Every albino creature that survives, every white animal that reaches adulthood in a world not designed for it, is a kind of proof. Proof that what should not be able to survive sometimes does. Proof that life finds its way with an inventiveness and a stubbornness that statistics cannot fully contain. proof that the exceptional is not always destroyed by the ordinary. Sometimes the white crow simply flies. Back to water now. Back to the warmth and the salt and the particular intelligence of marine mammals. Bottlenose dolphins are common in the Gulf of Mexico, present in large populations, well studied, the subject of decades of research. They are grey and sleek and social in ways that continue to surprise researchers even after all this time. They have names for each other, individual signature whistles, each as distinct as a human voice. They teach their young to use tools. They remember and maintain relationships over years. They play. And occasionally, one of them is born pink and white. In 2007, a charter boat captain named Eric Roux was working Louisiana's Calcasieu Lake when he spotted something extraordinary. A small, bright pink dolphin swimming among a pod of normally colored bottlenoses. Pink. A true, vivid, flamingo-adjacent pink. The color of skin without its pigment. The blood vessels of the skin contributing their warm red-pink tone to the animal's entire surface. The dolphin was named Pinky by those who encountered her, and she was remarkable not only for her color, but for the fact that she survived and thrived. Pinky was spotted repeatedly over the years that followed. An adult dolphin by now, regularly photographed by boaters who sought her out, living alongside her normal-colored pod. In 2015, she was spotted with a calf. A calf. An albino dolphin had grown to adulthood, mated, and produced offspring. The calf appeared normally colored, suggesting the albino genetics were recessive and the father did not carry the same mutation. But the birth was itself a statement. Pinky had not simply survived. She had flourished. The warm, shallow waters of Calcasieu Lake carry her in them. She moves through those waters with her pod, pink and unmistakable, as vivid as a sunrise reflection on still water. And her calf swims near her, grey as any normal dolphin, perhaps the carrier of a quiet genetic thread that might someday produce another pink swimming creature in some future generation not yet imagined. The lake holds that future, patient and warm and calm. In the high Arctic, everything about survival is extreme. The cold is not the polite cold of autumn. It is the kind of cold that reaches through clothing, that freezes exposed skin in minutes, that turns water to solid mid-fall. The land is open and enormous. No trees, no shelter, no hiding place of any kind for a large predator. The sky is a dome of wind. The light, when it comes, is horizontal and cold. Arctic wolves live here, and they are white. But wait, this is not albinism. The Arctic wolf's white coat is a fully functional adaptation, a trait selected over tens of thousands of years, because animals with paler coats survived the snow-covered landscape better than darker ones. Their whiteness is a feature, not a mutation. It belongs to them the way darkness belongs to the raven. But the true albino wolf, the wolf that occurs in the lower latitudes, in the forests of North America or Eurasia, where the pack is normally grey or black or tawny. That is a different story. White wolves have appeared in the historical record in Europe and North America. The ghost wolf of Karampur, a large, pale wolf that terrorized ranchers in New Mexico Territory in the 1890s, before being tracked down and killed by Ernest Thompson Seton, was described as noticeably pale compared to normal wolves. Not true white? Perhaps, but pale enough to have earned the name. In Yellowstone National Park, where wolves were reintroduced in 1995 after being absent for most of the 20th century, at least one animal in the reintroduced population appeared strikingly pale. Not albino in the strict sense, but light enough to be noticeable from the observation points at Lamar Valley, where wolf watchers gathered with spotting scopes in the cold mornings to find the packs in the valley below. The wolves moved through the snow without knowing they were being watched, without knowing they were beautiful, without knowing that a pale coat in a forested landscape was a disadvantage, visible against dark tree trunks, visible against brown autumn grass. Because they had already survived this far, and the pack moved together, and the hunt was the hunt, regardless of coat color. There is something in the pale wolf that speaks to endurance. Not elegance. Not grace. Though those are there too. Endurance. The simple continuation of the animal through a world that offers no particular accommodation for it. The pale wolf running with the grey pack, visible where others vanish, and running anyway. Running still. If there is one bird on this earth that seems to have received more than its fair share of visual splendor, it is the peacock. The Indian peafowl, the species most people think of when they think of peacocks, carries in its train one of the most spectacular structures in the animal kingdom. Those long, iridescent feathers, each tipped with an eye-like pattern of blue and green and gold, fanned out in display, shimmering with every movement. The color is structural, like the hummingbird's gorget. Microscopic barbules arranged to refract light in specific ways, so that the feather seems to change color as you move around it. Now, remove all of it. The albino peacock is pure white. Not a smaller, duller version of the colorful peacock. Not a washed-out imitation. The same feathers, the same extraordinary train, each feather still tipped with that eye pattern, the pattern visible as a texture in the white, like embossing on fine paper, but all of it white. When an albino peacock fans his train, it is one of the most visually arresting sights in the natural world. The fan is enormous. Each feather is perfect. The eye patterns are visible as pale circles within the white, and the whole thing moves, trembles, and shimmers. Because the peacock quivers his feathers when in full display, and all that white motion against any background is simply extraordinary. Albino peacocks are kept in parks and estates in various parts of the world. They are not a wild phenomenon in the same way as some of the animals we have discussed tonight. They exist primarily in managed settings, where their inability to hide in vegetation is not a survival issue. But they walk in the same way as any peacock, with that deliberate, slightly pompous, deeply self-assured walk that peacocks have perfected. and they display in the same way. A white peacock in full display on a green lawn, his train a great white circle behind him, the morning light catching every feather. It is the kind of image that makes people who see it in person struggle afterward to explain to those who have not. You can describe it. The words are all there. But something in the actual experience of it, the size, the stillness, the whiteness, does not quite transmit. You simply have to stand there and let it happen to you. Tasmania is an island. Not merely an island in the geographic sense, though it is that, separated from the mainland of Australia by the Bass Strait, those famously rough waters that the sailing ships feared. Tasmania is an island in the biological sense too, a place cut off long enough from the mainland, that its ecosystems develop differently, that certain species survived there that disappeared from the larger landmass, and that the gene pools of isolated animal populations developed characteristics not found elsewhere. Bennett's wallabies in Tasmania are common. They graze in paddocks and fields at dawn and dusk, their grey-brown coats blending into the dry grass and bracken. They are the textbook wallaby. Compact, alert, with those large ears that swivel independently to track sounds from every direction. And in certain populations, particularly in the western and southwestern parts of the island, white wallabies appear with remarkable regularity. Not individual outliers. A genuine tendency. A pocket in the gene pool that produces white animals often enough that they are a known and expected feature of certain areas. Bruny Island, off Tasmania's southeast coast, is famous for its white wallabies. Visitors come specifically to see them. Wildlife guides take small groups through the evening light to places where the white wallabies graze. And the animals are there, reliably, grazing in their unhurried way, pale against the green. There is a quality to the Tasmanian light in the late afternoon, a particular golden clarity that the island gets, perhaps because of the clean air that comes off the Southern Ocean, that makes a white wallaby stand out with an almost unreal sharpness. The grass is very green. The sky is very blue. And the white wallaby is just there, grazing, ears swiveling, tail providing its counterbalance, completely comfortable in its own existence. The tourists take photographs. The guides answer questions. The white wallabies eat grass. It is a perfect arrangement. Barn owls are already half ghost. Their normal coloring, the pale, buff gold back, the pure white face, the white underparts, makes them look, even in their non-albino form, like something the dark invented. They fly in complete silence. Their wing feathers have comb-like edges that break up turbulence before it can become sound. They hunt by hearing more than sight. Their heart-shaped facial disc, collecting sound and channeling it to ears positioned asymmetrically on their skull, allowing them to triangulate the precise location of a mouse in total darkness. A barn owl crossing a field at night is a pale shape in the air. There and then gone. A flicker at the edge of the headlights. A ghost in the farmer's field. Now make that owl truly albino. Albino barn owls have been documented and are sometimes kept by wildlife rehabilitators who find them unable to survive in the wild. The pure white coloring making them even more conspicuous than the already pale standard bird, reducing their ability to hunt effectively because their approach is more visible to prey. Their eyes are pink-red, their feathers an absolute white, their entire being a kind of luminous uncertainty at the edge of sight. An albino barn owl in a wildlife center, perched on a branch in a dimly lit space, staring at you with those extraordinary pink-red eyes and that white face. It looks like something that decided to leave the world of myth and become briefly, temporarily, touchably real. People who have encountered albino barn owls often describe a kind of stillness that comes over them. Not a dramatic stillness. Not shock or awe in the loud sense. More like the body deciding, without consulting the mind, to just stop and pay full attention. The owl does not care. It stares back with its extraordinary eyes, thinking whatever owls think in the quiet dark, and waits for something it finds more interesting than a human to appear. We have traveled far tonight. We have stood at the edge of forests and watched white deer dissolve back into the trees. We have leaned over the railing of a boat and seen an enormous white whale breach in the summer ocean. We have sat quietly in the golden grass and watched a white lion walk through the thorn trees at sunrise. We have knelt on a dark beach and watched pale turtle hatchlings begin their impossible journey to the sea. We have sat with a white gorilla who lived his whole life under the eyes of a city that loved him. We have watched a pink dolphin leap in warm southern water with her grey calf nearby. We have looked up at a white peacock and felt the particular silence that only beauty of a certain kind can produce. And in all of it, what have these animals asked of us? Nothing. They have not performed their rarity. They have not sought our attention. They have not asked to be protected or admired or remembered. They have simply continued. Eating and moving and resting and sometimes dying young, but sometimes, surviving into lives that surprised everyone, including perhaps the universe that produced them. What rarity asks of us, I think, is attention. Not management. Not ownership. Not the frantic human impulse to capture and catalogue and control. Just attention. The willingness to stop, to look, to acknowledge that something extraordinary is happening in front of you, and let it matter. Every white deer that steps into a clearing at dusk is asking, without asking, for exactly that. For someone to stop driving and simply look. For someone to feel, even briefly, that the world is deeper and stranger and more generous than it normally appears. These animals remind us that nature is not a predictable system delivering predictable results. It is a field of enormous possibility, operating by rules we understand only partially, producing surprises at the edge of our expectations, and sometimes, rarely, in a frequency that cannot be scheduled or demanded, producing something so improbable that it changes the way you think about what the word probable means. A white whale, a white lion, a white gorilla, a pink dolphin nursing her grey calf, a white kiwi moving through the New Zealand night. They are out there. Some of them right now, as you listen to this, moving through their habitats, sleeping in the warmth, breathing in the dark, alive in their impossible whiteness, utterly unbothered by how unlikely they were supposed to be. There are more of them. The world is wider than one evening can hold, and there are pale creatures in it we have not yet visited. So let us keep going. Let the night deepen a little further. Let your breath stay slow. The albino elephant is perhaps the rarest of all land animals in this condition, and perhaps the most startling to encounter on paper, because the elephant is already such a large and dignified animal that imagining it in white requires a particular adjustment of the imagination. Elephants are grey. Not a uniform grey. They vary across individuals and populations, from the deep charcoal of a forest elephant to the lighter, dustier tone of a savanna elephant who has been rolling in pale ochre earth. But grey, fundamentally, the colour of something ancient and weathered and certain. There are documented cases of albino and near-albino elephants in Asia and Africa. In Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, white elephants have been considered sacred for centuries. They are not necessarily true albinos in the biological sense. The term white elephant in this context describes animals that are unusually pale, pinkish or cream-colored, with lighter eyes and paler skin in the folds and ears. But they are revered with an intensity that goes far beyond their rarity. In Burmese royal tradition, a white elephant was considered a direct sign of the monarch's power and legitimacy. To possess one was to possess a kind of divine endorsement. The animals were given titles, housed in elaborate structures, fed from gold vessels. They were bathed in ceremonies and adorned with cloth of great value. When a white elephant was born in the territory of a king, it was understood that the heavens were speaking clearly, that this reign was blessed, that this land was favored. The current government of Myanmar still keeps white elephants. They are housed in Naypyidaw, the capital, and photographed periodically to communicate their continued presence. Each one is given a formal name and a formal rank. They live surrounded by ceremony they do not understand, and reverence they do not require, because they are simply elephants. Large, intelligent, long-memoried creatures who would prefer forest to formality in any world they could choose. In Africa, true albino elephants have been photographed in Kruger National Park in South Africa and in Amboseli in Kenya. These are fully albino animals. Pink-skinned, light-eyed, their enormous ears pale and almost translucent in strong light. The photographs are extraordinary. The animal stands beside normally pigmented family members, and the contrast is complete. The pale form among the grey ones, same size, same posture, same slow and certain way of moving through the world. An albino elephant faces specific hardships. The skin, without melanin, is highly vulnerable to sunburn, and elephants spend long hours under direct tropical sun. The eyes, without protective pigment, are sensitive to light in ways that affect how well the animal can see in bright conditions. And, in the wild, visibility matters. Even for an animal as large as an elephant, which technically has few natural predators as an adult, the pale coloring still affects social dynamics within the herd and draws unwanted attention from humans who may not mean well. And yet, elephant herds are matriarchal, tight-knit, fiercely protective of their members. When an albino calf is born into a herd, the herd does not distinguish it from any other calf. The aunts gather around it. The older females guide it. The mother nurses it with the same devotion she would give any young. The elephant family does not know about rarity. It does not know about genetics or odds or the human concept of extraordinary. It only knows. This is one of ours. And it protects it accordingly. The elephant drinks from the river at dawn, its pale form reflected in the still water, its family moving around it in the slow, certain way of elephants who have nowhere urgent to be. The water is cold and the morning is quiet, and nothing in the landscape marks this animal as anything other than what it is: a young elephant, belonging completely to its herd, drinking in the early light. There is a river in the Amazon basin, a tributary of the great river, running through forest so dense that the canopy closes over it completely in places, and the water moves through a green-lit tunnel of vegetation, where a white cayman has been reported more than once. Caymans are the South American relatives of alligators. They are the ambush architects of the Amazon, floating at the water's surface in the darkness, still as driftwood, their eyes catching what little light reaches the river. Their scales are the color of river, mud, and shadow. Their stillness is profound. They can wait, absolutely motionless, for hours, patient in the way that only cold-blooded things can be patient, with a metabolism that does not demand urgency. An albino cayman in the black water of an Amazon tributary. The reports are rare and unconfirmed by formal science. The Amazon is enormous, and many things live in it that have not yet been formally described. But the local fishermen who work those rivers know what they have seen. They speak of a pale cayman that appears occasionally in a certain stretch of water, surfacing near the bank at dusk, its white scales catching the last amber light. They do not approach it. They do not name it in the way English speakers might name something. They simply know it is there, and they treat that knowledge with the particular respect that people who live close to rivers develop for things they cannot fully explain. The Amazon holds so many secrets. Its depths and its dark backwaters contain species unknown to science, behaviors undocumented, individuals that will live and die without any human ever recording their existence. That a white cayman might move through those waters, pale in the dark water, unhurried, ancient, is not a difficult thing to believe. The river keeps its own records. In the silt, in the memory of the fisherman, in the water itself, which has been moving south toward the sea for longer than any of us can fully imagine. Let the Amazon fade now into something cooler, something northern. Picture a lake in Finland in January. The ice is thick enough to walk on, a foot or more in places, and the snow on top of it has been compressed by wind into a surface that is almost perfectly smooth. The birch trees at the lake's edge are bare and white. The sky is the pale blue of deep winter, the sun barely clearing the horizon even at midday. In the forest around this lake, a white hare moves through the snow. Mountain hares in their winter coats are already white. This is not albinism but seasonal camouflage, the coat changing from brown-grey in summer to white in winter as the daylight hours shorten. But occasionally, a hare is born that carries its whiteness year-round, an albino individual that does not shift with the seasons, but remains pale through the brown and green of the warmer months, visible against every landscape that is not snow. In winter, an albino hare is invisible. In summer, it is not. This is the particular challenge of the albino hare. Half the year it has perfect cover, and half the year it has almost none. Hares are animals of speed and stillness. Their defense is not fighting. They are not built for confrontation. Their defense is the sudden explosion of movement, the jink and dodge, the flat-out sprint that can reach speeds of nearly 40 miles per hour over short distances. And when running does not serve, stillness, the complete cessation of movement. The hare crouched in a field, so motionless it seems to stop existing, relying on its coat to make it invisible to the hawk circling overhead. The albino hare in summer has to rely on that speed entirely. Every fox knows where it is. Every buzzard can see it from 200 meters. It is a white shape in a green field, and it has to be faster and luckier than its brown-coated neighbors every single day. But in January, when the snow is deep and the sky is pale and the whole landscape has given itself over to white, the albino hare is not disadvantaged. It is invisible. Crouched in its form, the shallow depression in the snow where it rests, it is simply part of the winter. There is a kind of justice in that. Not the dramatic justice of a story, where a wrong is righted and balance is restored. Something quieter. A season's grace. A few months each year when the thing that makes survival difficult becomes, briefly, the very thing that keeps the animal safe. The hare sits in its shallow snow hollow. Its eyes are half closed. Its breathing is slow and even. The wind moves across the top of the snowfield without disturbing it. It is exactly the color of everything around it. For now, for this season, perfectly at home. In the rivers of the American Midwest, there is a fish called the channel catfish, a common species, widely distributed, the kind of fish that generations of children have caught from riverbanks on summer afternoons. The channel catfish is grey-blue on its back, pale on its belly, with the long whisker-like barbels that give catfish their name. It is a quiet, bottom-feeding fish, not glamorous, not celebrated in the way of trout or salmon, but reliable and widespread and entirely at home in the slow-moving rivers and lakes of the central continent. And sometimes, one is born white. Albino catfish are documented across multiple species: channel catfish, flathead catfish, blue catfish, and they turn up in rivers and reservoirs across the United States with enough regularity that anglers have a specific name for them. They are called ghost catfish. A ghost catfish is a white or pale yellow fish. The eyes pink-red, the barbels pale, the entire animal the color of old ivory or cream. Underwater, in the murky green-brown of a Midwestern river, it does not blend the way its gray-blue relatives do. It is visible, distinct, a pale shape moving slowly along the bottom, its barbels working the silt, its tail sweeping slowly from side to side. Ghost catfish are pursued by anglers the way rare things are always pursued by people who have already caught everything ordinary. They are not prized for size. An albino catfish is no larger than its normally colored counterpart. They are not prized for flavor. By most accounts, they taste identical. They are prized purely for their improbability, for the fact that in a river full of gray fish, this one is white. And when you pull it from the water on a quiet morning and hold it in the light for a moment before releasing it, pale and calm in your hands, gills working, tail sweeping, something in that moment is not quite ordinary. Most anglers who catch ghost catfish release them. There is an informal ethic around it. Not a rule, not a law, just a shared sense that some things should not be taken. That some encounters are complete in themselves, needing only the moment of recognition and then the return to the water. The fish goes back. The water closes over it. The river continues south toward wherever rivers go. And somewhere under the green-brown current, a pale ghost moves along the bottom, entirely absorbed in the ancient work of being a fish. There is an island off the coast of Western Australia called Dirk Hartog Island, named for a Dutch navigator who landed there in 1616, making it one of the earliest recorded European landfalls on the Australian continent. It is a long, narrow island, running roughly north to south, edged by red cliffs on the western side and sheltered shallow water on the east. The vegetation is sparse and wind-battered. The light there is ferocious. The Western Australian sun without relief, bouncing off pale sand and glittering water. On this island, and in the shallow sea around it, lives the dugong, a large, slow-moving marine mammal, the only purely herbivorous mammal that lives entirely in the sea. Dugongs graze on seagrass in the shallow waters of the Indo-Pacific, moving through the warm shallows the way cows move through a meadow, unhurried, methodical, consuming great quantities of grass over long grazing periods. They are grey. Grey-brown, smooth-skinned, torpedo-shaped, with a broad flat tail and the gentle downward curve of a snout designed for grazing the seafloor. They move through the water with a slow, rolling grace that has led some historians to speculate that early sailors, glimpsing them at distance from a rolling ship, produced the first mermaid stories. In the warm, shallow waters near Shark Bay, the body of water between Dirk Hartog Island and the mainland, there have been reports over the years of an unusually pale dugong. Not confirmed by formal research in the way of a tagged and studied individual, but noted by the fishermen and the boaters and the tour operators who work those waters regularly. A pale dugong, lighter than the rest, moving through the seagrass meadows with the same bovine patience as its grey neighbours, but unmistakable when spotted from above in the clear, shallow water. Shark Bay is a World Heritage Site, one of the most biodiverse marine environments on the Australian coast. Its seagrass beds are enormous, among the largest in the world, and they support one of the largest dugong populations anywhere. 10,000 dugongs or more move through these waters. And somewhere among them, possibly, a pale one grazes in the afternoon light, moving slow, eating steady, the water warm around it, the seagrass waving in the gentle current below. The world does not stop for it. The other dugongs do not move aside. The seagrass does not part in deference. It simply grazes, as dugongs have grazed in these waters for millions of years, in whatever color it happened to be born. Continuity. Unglamorous and beautiful. The pale animal in the warm sea, doing the same thing it has always done, without drama, without apology, simply feeding and breathing and moving forward through another warm afternoon. There is one more animal I want to tell you about before this evening closes. Not a large animal. Not a whale or a gorilla or a lion. Something small. In the hedgerows and gardens of rural England, and in the woodlands of continental Europe, there lives the hedgehog. That small, prickly, utterly endearing mammal that has occupied a particular corner of British affection for as long as people there have had gardens. The hedgehog shuffles through the dark in the classic manner. Nose down, busy, sniffing out beetles and earthworms and slugs with a focus that suggests it takes its work very seriously. Its spines are brown and cream-banded. Its face is the warm brown-grey of dry earth. It is, in every respect, the color of the undergrowth it moves through. And occasionally, rarely, but with enough consistency to be documented across the British Isles, a white hedgehog is found. Albino hedgehogs have been brought into wildlife rescue centers, photographed in gardens by surprised homeowners, and spotted shuffling along footpaths by walkers who stopped and could not quite believe what they were seeing. They are white all over, their spines the pale cream white of unbleached linen, their faces pink, their small eyes that characteristic albino red-pink. A white hedgehog is a strange and wonderful thing to encounter. Hedgehogs are already charming. There is something about their size and their busyness and their spiny vulnerability that draws a specific kind of human affection. Make one white, and that charm intensifies. It becomes something slightly out of the ordinary world. A garden creature that looks like it wandered in from a different kind of story. Albino hedgehogs in the wild face the usual challenges. They are more visible to predators, particularly to owls hunting at night, who rely on the contrast of a dark moving shape against lighter ground. A white hedgehog against a dark garden path is exactly what a barn owl is looking for. Their survival odds in the wild are lower than their brown counterparts. In captivity or in managed wildlife care, they can thrive. But there is something I find quietly moving about the white hedgehog in a garden at midnight. Shuffling through the wet grass, completely absorbed in the search for beetles, its pale form catching the light from a distant window. It does not know it is unusual. It has never seen another hedgehog and compared itself. It simply is what it is. Small, determined, hungry, alive in the dark, going about its night with complete conviction. In the whole long history of hedgehogs, and they have been around for 15 million years, give or take, there have been white ones, appearing and disappearing in the hedgerows and gardens of the world, each one a small genetic surprise, each one living its short hedgehog life with the same intensity as every brown one before it. Eating beetles in the rain, rolling into a ball at the first sign of danger, waking at dusk and beginning again. The white hedgehog does not know it is rare. And there is something generous in that. The way the rarest things often carry their rarity without any weight at all. Let us rest here for one more story before the night fully takes you. In Japan, the jungle crow is a familiar presence in the cities. Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto. These birds move through the urban landscape with a confidence that reflects their intelligence. They are large crows, glossy black, with a thick curved bill that gives them a slightly more imposing profile than the carrion crows of Europe. They have learned to use traffic lights, dropping hard nuts in front of waiting vehicles, then waiting for the light to change and the cars to crack the shells, then walking out to collect the contents when the light turns red again. They are, in every sense, city animals. Adapted, intelligent, entirely at ease in a landscape of concrete and wire and noise. In 2018, photographs taken in a park in Tokyo showed a white crow among the normal black ones. Not white all over. Leucistic, with patches of normal black remaining on the wings and tail, but predominantly white, bright against the grey paths and the green of the park trees. The bird behaved exactly like any other jungle crow. It foraged in the park's rubbish bins. It called from the treetops in that loud, declarative way of crows who have something to say and intend to say it. It watched the humans below with that crow attentiveness, assessing, calculating, filing information for later use. In Japanese aesthetic tradition, white animals hold a particular significance. They appear in the concept of shiro, whiteness associated with purity and spiritual significance. The white crow appears in several Japanese folk tales as a messenger, a bird that carries communication between the visible world and something beyond it. When one appeared in a Tokyo park, photographed by dozens of visitors, local social media treated it with the particular reverence the Japanese culture extends to things that arrive unexpectedly and seem to carry meaning. The crow did not know it was meaningful. It was looking for food. It was assessing the humans below for the probability of dropped snacks. It was being a crow in the entirely unsentimental way that crows are crows. But the humans in the park stood and watched it. They took photographs. They pointed it out to each other with lowered voices, the way people do when they are trying not to disturb something that feels, however briefly, like a visitation. A white crow in a Tokyo park. The city going on around it. The trains and the traffic and the 10 million daily urgencies of a great metropolis. And one pale bird in a park tree, looking down at everything with those bright crow eyes, thinking whatever crows think. The city did not stop. The bird did not care. And somewhere in the space between those two facts, something small and real and beautiful happened, and then was over, and the park went back to being a park. Antarctica. The coldest, windiest, driest continent on Earth. A landscape that has decided, firmly, to exist at the far edge of the hospitable. The sea ice. The glaciers that have been building for millions of years. The sky that changes from blinding white to pale green in the long evenings when the aurora begins to move. And the penguins. Hundreds of thousands of penguins in some colonies. Chinstrap, Adelie, King, Emperor. All of them in their black and white formal wear. All of them waddling with that particular purposeful clumsiness on land, and becoming sleek and fast and entirely capable the moment they enter the water. In 2012, a research team working with a colony of chinstrap penguins on the Antarctic peninsula spotted something unusual. A single penguin in the colony was brown. Not white. Not albino. Brown. A warm, milk chocolate brown where the black should have been, pale where the white normally was. The condition is called isobalinalism, a dilution of all pigments simultaneously, affecting both the black and white coloring and producing this unusual warm-toned bird. Isobaline penguins are not common, but they appear in several species. Chinstraps, king penguins, gentoos, with enough regularity that they have been documented and studied across multiple decades of Antarctic research. Each one stands out in the colony with the same quiet clarity. The warm brown bird in the sea of black and white, behaving exactly as any other penguin, entirely unaware that it has wandered into the frame of every photographer in the vicinity. Albino penguins, fully white-feathered, pink-eyed, are even rarer still. True albinos are documented but are among the rarest color variants in the penguin world. The few confirmed photographs show birds of an extraordinary paleness. White, where black should be, pale pink, where the usual cream-white skin appears, the eyes that characteristic red-pink of true albinism. A white penguin standing in a colony of 10,000 black and white penguins. The noise is constant there. Penguin colonies are not quiet. The wind is cold. The sky is enormous. And in all of it, one white bird, doing exactly what all the others are doing, standing, calling, waddling, existing, exactly the same and exactly different. It does not need the 10,000 others to step aside. It does not need the world to rearrange itself. It simply stands in the midst of everything, wearing its whiteness without apology or explanation, and carries on. You have been listening for a long time now. And before the night takes you fully, there is one more thing worth saying about all of these animals. Every single one of them, the white deer at the forest edge, the white whale in the Southern Ocean, the albino gorilla in Barcelona, the pink dolphin nursing her calf, the white lion at sunrise in the Timbavati. Every one of them arrived in the world without choosing to be extraordinary. They did not select their whiteness. They did not decide to be rare. They simply opened their eyes for the first time and found themselves in whatever body they had been given, in whatever landscape they had been born to, and they got on with it. That is perhaps the thing that moves me most. Not the rarity itself, though the rarity is extraordinary. Not the beauty, though the beauty is real. But the getting on with it. The white hare that lives half the year in danger and half the year invisible, and runs its impossible speeds either way. The pale alligator floating in its warm water, doing what alligators have done for 200 million years, because that is what alligators do. The white hedgehog shuffling through the wet garden at midnight, sniffing for beetles, entirely focused on the work of the night. There is a kind of courage in that. Not the loud kind of courage that announces itself and expects recognition. The quiet kind. The kind that simply continues without needing the world to notice. We carry our own kinds of visibility. The ways we stand out when we would rather blend in. The differences we did not choose and cannot change. The things about us that the world sometimes makes harder. And watching these pale animals, eating and sleeping and moving and persisting, I find something that feels like a quiet instruction. Not inspiration in the loud, motivational sense. Something gentler. A reminder that the extraordinary is not always at war with the ordinary. That a white deer can simply be a deer. That a pale wolf can simply be a wolf. That whatever we carry does not have to define us as tragic or heroic. It can simply be part of who we are, woven in, present, and still compatible with a life fully lived. The world outside, whatever it holds, has probably grown quieter in these hours. The sounds that were there when you first lay down have softened or disappeared. The light, if there was any, is gone. And all these white animals are out there somewhere. In the forests of Quebec, a white wolf rests with its pack in the first snow of November. Somewhere in the warm water off the coast of Louisiana, a pink dolphin surfaces to breathe in the dark. In a bamboo forest in Sichuan, a white giant panda moves through the green dark, reaching for another stalk. In the waters between Australia and Antarctica, a white whale is moving south. They are all continuing. Every one of them. Through the dark and the cold and the warmth and the deep water. Persistent and pale and entirely themselves. Life is very good at continuing. It continues in ordinary ways, in the million small, unremarkable acts of survival that fill every ecosystem. And it continues, sometimes in ways that have no precedent, in colors that were never expected, in individuals so rare that their existence is itself a kind of statement. I am here. This is what I look like. And I intend to keep going. That is, maybe, the quietest and most resilient thing that can be said. You are here too. In your particular, specific, unrepeatable way. Present. Breathing. Resting. Let everything you were carrying today set itself down beside you. You do not have to solve it tonight. You do not have to hold it tonight. Whatever it is, it will be there in the morning, and you will be more prepared to meet it after sleep than after another hour of thought. Let the white deer step back into the forest. Let the white whale dive down into the dark water. Let the white lion settle into the long grass of the Timbavati, and let its eyes close in the early morning warmth. Follow them into the quiet. Follow them into the dark that is not frightening, but simply resting, simply still, simply a field of ease waiting for you to enter it. Your breathing is slower now. That is good. That is exactly right. From all of us at Sleepy Science, thank you. Thank you for spending this time here. If tonight found you something worth holding, leave a comment when you wake. We love hearing what stayed with you. If you want to help keep this channel going and these quiet evenings coming, there is a Patreon below. Every contribution there matters more than you know. But for now, close your eyes. Breathe deeply. And wherever you are in the world tonight, know that somewhere, in a forest or an ocean or a mountain valley you will never visit, a white animal is moving through the dark. Quiet and rare and entirely at peace. And in some small way that does not require any explanation at all, it is keeping watch. Good night. Sleep well. We will be here when you need us again. The pale animals are out there, and so are you.